Welcome to Early, the podcast about business in Web3 from Bankless Consulting. I'm your host, DSide, and on each episode of Early, I'm joined by thought leaders, innovators, and other denizens of Web3 who are building the internet of the future. Money is programmable, assets are digital, and exchanges are decentralized here. So join me on this journey into the past, the present, and the future of Web3. And remember, if you're here, you're early. Welcome to Early, the podcast about Web3 from Bankless Consulting. My special guest today is HPayne from Shapeshift. HPayne is the marketing workstream leader at Shapeshift. He has background in software marketing, IT, and he just shared with me that he was in the music industry for a few years. So I want to hear all about that. Welcome, HPayne. How are you, man?
Thank you. It's doing good. It's I wouldn't say a beautiful sunny day in California, but it's actually a gloomy day, but still a beautiful day nonetheless. It's going to be a great day. It's potentially even the best day ever, as we say at Shapeshift. Every single day, every day is the best day ever.
Awesome.
Yes,
well,
that's where we're at.
As your hat says, GM, and as we all say in
indeed.
Web3, it's always GM in Web3. Yeah, man. So first off, tell us about Shapeshift. What is Shapeshift?
Yeah, so Shapeshift is... Oh, so do you want the whole history, or do you just want what Shapeshift is now?
Yeah, sure. Let's start from the beginning. I think it's a compelling story.
Yeah, so Shapeshift was one of the first permissionless ways to basically swap Bitcoin for a number of tokens. I got into it back in 2014. That's just around when it first kicked off. They started... that's where I swapped Bitcoin for Darkcoin. It was basically an exchange. It was a swapper. One of the first places where you could swap crypto, right? And so since then it grew into a company, a pretty large company in Denver, and then in 2021 had to implement KYC, 2021 had to implement KYC, and that lost a ton of its users, right? So before that it was no KYC, totally free exchange. You go in, swap crypto, you had logged in with an email address and a password, and that was it. That's all they knew about you. KYC got implemented. Actually, it might not have been 2020. It might have been actually earlier than that. Lost almost 80% of its user base. Then decentralized. It decentralized in 2021 into a DAO, and since then it's been sort of building up into sort of where we are now, where it's a basically community-owned, private, open source, decentralized, completely free platform. Basically, it's original to the true ethos of what Shapeshift wanted to be, or it was in 2014, a place where people could permissionlessly trade and swap and exist in the crypto ecosystem, which is super cool. It's exactly what the world needs right now.
So why did that happen? Why did KYC become necessary?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So crypto was, as we all know, crypto was a super it's always been the Wild West, right? And so largely, I think this is sort of a larger thought piece of the government or the industry. The industry is largely, at least specifically in the United States, the industry is largely ambiguous when it comes to where the regulation boundary lines stay. And so Shapeshift at the time was paying, I don't know the exact figures. I didn't work for Shapeshift when it was centralized, but I've heard stories that Shapeshift paid upwards of $2 million a year in legal just to make sure it was being compliant and on the up and up with things. And so as the government slowly tried to hone in exactly where crypto exchanges needed to sit, and where when you're dealing with actually holding other and interacting with customer funds, where they need to sit, right? They were oh, okay, we need to clearly comply with some AML regulation. We need to clearly have some sort of boundaries here. And just like any other exchange, like Coinbase, like Binance, like any other US operating crypto exchange, KYC was mandated, and it's okay, cool. Because Shapeshift at that time, I think, was facilitating the trades. So, if you wanted to swap Bitcoin for Darkcoin, you'd go, oh, here's my Bitcoin. Shapeshift would then take custody of that and then use its own exchange and swap it, and then spit out whatever token you wanted in its place. So it was a custodial exchange in that regard. And then eventually moved to decentralized exchanging using Thorchain, where basically everything was then on-chain, didn't touch funds. Then at that point was able to remove KYC, because at that point Shapeshift was no longer the custodial of funds during any kind of transaction. Yeah.
So went from centralized to regulated centralized to decentralized, essentially.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so why that shift, or why that change? I keep using the word shift. It's in my head, I guess. Why that change from and shapeshift? There you go. I guess it's appropriate, right? Why that change from I guess any sort of centralized and regulated exchange to a DEX?
It's very interesting because I can't give you a reason, because there's so many reasons that are out there, and there's no real reason. I think at the end of the day, it was too expensive. The cost of doing business was too expensive. I think, official. This is my perspective, right? This is not like an official like Shapeshift like statement. This is just my perspective as an outsider. Yeah.
Right. You were not with the company.
I was not.
So
no, I was not the company.
Your observation as a user.
Yeah. This is my observation
member.
purely as a user and community member. The cost of doing business was too high. Like I said, legal costs, $2 million at least a year. Regulation was getting super constricting. It's like, okay, if we're going KYC go against everything Shapeshift believed in. I was told stories of people at centralized Shapeshift where they had to implement that, and everyone was like, oh, this like super sucks. Like, this is terrible. This doesn't facilitate as frictionless payments as we want to. This is totally squandering what we want, and everyone who didn't want to do KYC just moved overseas to all the overseas DEXes. Exchanges. Right. So then they didn't have to, do some of this stuff. So largely, that's my perspective. The rails were already there, because once Shapeshift integrated Thorchain, they were able to remove the KYC element because they were no longer touching funds. They already had a token, which was the Fox token, which originally was used for Fox back, which gave you a portion of your gas back in Fox tokens, and then also Rainfall, where you were just randomly selected and airdropped some tokens based on how much Fox you held. There was some sort of thing that determined that. I personally, as a user, hated Rainfall, but some people loved it. And so the rails were there, right, from the very beginning.
So, in your opinion, how do you feel about regulation of decentralized crypto exchanges? So, and let me just go back on that question, because I'm a firm believer that certainly like centralized exchanges should be regulated, but is there a place for, where should DEXes fit into that in terms of regulation?
Yeah. Okay. Totally. I'll give you a stance for like where I sit with Shapeshift. So Shapeshift is, it's more than a DEX. So Shapeshift is a DEX aggregator. So we aggregate 1inch, 0x, Thorchain, Osmosis, House Swap, all of these different liquidity sources into one place, right? And so we're more of a front end than an actual DEX. So when I'm thinking specifically about like where regulation sits with Shapeshift, Shapeshift as a front end, I'm viewing it as like a non-regulation period, because what we're doing is we're just making a pretty UI so you can push buttons instead of having to type in custom lines in Etherscan and execute transactions on chain like that. Like there's nothing that we provide that you couldn't already do yourself if you just typed in code, but we're just making it easy for you, and it's free. Sure. So there's no like, in my mind, that's like a non-regulation point. In terms of like decentralized exchanges, like it's also sort of the same idea, where it's like, okay, cool, like there's no actual like person taking custody of the moment. It's all code. People understand like where that code sits. The code is usually open source, or at least able to be viewed, and so there's no like sneaky behind the doors dealings and wheelings. Wheelings and dealings, that's the word. And so largely when it comes to decentralized exchanges, I'm totally just like, it's free market, baby. Like that's largely where I sit, which is sort of controversial, but also I feel like a pretty solid opinion that most people hold.
Yeah, and I believe there's a place for it in global finance. If you're willing to put yourself into it, take responsibility for the ownership of your own money, coins, tokens, whatever it may be, then go right ahead. This is your place. If you want it to be in a more centralized, regulated, insured place, go to Coinbase, or put your money with JP Morgan Chase.
Exactly. No, and the thing is that's crazy is like with Coinbase and stuff, like as the marketing person, right, or as one of the marketing as the marketing workstream leader, right, I'm going in and checking some of these DEXes like liquidity, or I'm checking like where tokens are moving, and it's really interesting because I can get full on-chain analytics of a lot of these DEXes. I can see exactly where money is at any given time. If I go to Coinbase, it's like, cool, man, like there's money here, like let's check one of the 7 hot wallets and like figure it out, and like let's use their reporting that they tell me, and it feels really weird. Like, and also with like these DEXes, I can see like where the traders are moving, like what people are doing, and largely all that stuff is super transparent, super open to me. And the thing is, anyone can access that. It doesn't take a special code. I just type in like, hey, like what is blah 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 blah, and it just pops up. With centralized exchanges, like all super like behind all these curtains.
Yeah, and that is one of the major differences, right? So that's why centralized exchanges should be regulated, and I'm all for it. You know, I think what Coinbase is, and Coinbase too, by the way, you know, I like what Brian Armstrong is doing in that he's like, we'll work with you. Like, let's regulate this. Let's make the rules for what Coinbase, ourselves, and our competitors need to provide, the information we need to provide, whatever that is, we'll do it. And this way, because it is behind the scenes, it's not totally transparent. There's protection for the consumer on that. Whereas, decentralized exchanges, it's all right in the open, and there doesn't need to be as much regulation, right? Because it's available to you and me.
Exactly. No, and I try to tell this for like imagine any company like having just their stuff on chain, and you could just view like their balance, like, hey, like I want to check out 3M's like balance statement on chain, and you could literally see like, hey, like why is 3M paying $100,000 over to that wallet every month? Like, I wonder why. Like, what's going on? And then you could literally hop over to that wallet and then see what the wallet's doing, and then like daisy chain from there. It's so crazy, and like largely that's what makes me the most excited about some of this Web3 tech. Is that specific on chain, but people who choose to say like stay in the like the Web 2 like centralized, you know, regulated entity that has more of that obfuscation and insurance, like that's also totally fine. The problem that I'm seeing with like the US is we're like lagging behind, is that we're just like, we can't make a decision, and that's what largely like is super unappealing to people, you know, especially people like me. Like we can't, like the government, I don't know what the regulation viewpoint is. Right. I don't really know what the optics are. It seems bad, but you know, who really knows?
Yeah. It will take time. It will take time for governments and regulators to agree to anything. So, you know, in the meantime, we operate in a gray area, and you know, that's part of the risk we're taking, right? That's the biz. It really is. So, Shapeshift is a DAO now. How does that affect your daily operations?
Like in every single way. So it's crazy. I you know, when I first got this job, like a year and a half ago, holy crap, time flies. I have a business mentor, and it's an executive like marketing director mentor. And like this guy's like, okay, like this is what you do this, and this is how it operates. And I'm like, and I paused him after like 10 minutes of him talking. I was like, dude, like none of that exists. Like, you have to realize I am every single one of those things you just mentioned. Like, that's all me, man. Like, I am the HR department. I am the marketing director. I am the financial officer that's like auditing the bills and paying shit. Like, I'm literally everyone. And so, you know, in terms of like how it affects like my own personal like operations as like trying to run a work stream, you know, it's really an all-in-one package where it's almost like you're running your own. It is a sub-DAO, right? So the way the marketing work stream operates is, you know, we put up a proposal. So for 6 months, we want to get paid $125,000 a month, and of that, we're going to allocate and then we get that discretionary spending pushed to our wallet every month, and then we pay out people and do what we want to do from there. Of course, I'm not getting $125,000 a month. That would be crazy awesome. But that's sort of how that works.
Sure. And is the community at Shapeshift, is the community very involved in those decisions?
Oh, super. Yeah. The community is super, super involved. And so you can actually go to forum.shapeshift.com. It'll take you to our governance page. We have a really, really in-depth governance process, which is very, very well vetted, in my opinion, and it always is evolving. So there's 3 stages. There's incubation, ideation, and then the actual formal governance vote. And so step 1 is you post your idea up on the forum. You're like, hey, I have this idea. There's like, what do you think? Let's get some thoughts. Let's spitball it. It sits up there for a bit. I think it's 4 days. I can't speak off the top of my head. It's like 4 days. Then after that, it moves to incubation, where basically you throw up, you're like, hey, like this is the refined proposal. Here it is, and laid out in these different formats. And it goes through the formal vote. and then after it goes to the formal vote, people vote on it, and the amount of votes we see turn out is super impressive. I think I've seen upwards of like 24 million Fox vote on a proposal, which is crazy. And like not from one wallet. This is like from
I was going to say
hundreds and hundreds of wallets.
How many people is that?
I have no idea how many people were behind the wallets, but in terms of wallets themselves, I'd say like 400, 500 potentially. I mean, upwards of like regularly voting, I would say something along those lines. Yep. And then of course random people just jump in occasionally.
No, that's community involvement right there. That's excellent. How do you keep the community engaged?
That's a good question. So everyone, I mean, of course, we refer to everyone as foxes. Everyone is a fox at Shapeshift. Everyone is the Shapeshift fox, and so that's like step number one. In terms of other things we can do, the way we are a DAO, anyone can contribute. So the way that work streams work is like, especially the marketing work stream, right? Specifically, someone could come in and say, "Hey, I have an idea. Why don't you do this?" And then I'll be like, "Hey, that's a great idea," or like, "Hey, that's a really dumb idea," or "Hey, like, yes, but blah." And so in terms of like engagement, anyone can contribute. Everyone is a worker and is a token holder, and everyone is just as important as each other. So if you hold one Fox token,
all you need to do is hold a token.
All you need to do is hold Fox. And honestly, like, I don't even like, people can come into the Discord server, they could hold no Fox and be like, "Hey man, like you should do this," and then I'll be like, "Cool." like I don't check them. I'm not like, "Show me your Fox tokens." It's more like, "Hey, like you have an idea, like you want to contribute to open source public goods that are free to use for everyone to use, for everyone to like consume, like sure, by all means." Like, and I largely believe in the power of groupthink. And so the way that, or not groupthink, but like group mind, where like many minds coming together, dogfooding an idea or suggesting ideas is so much more powerful and like way more smarter than I could ever be in my entire life, which is super cool. But yeah, so back to in terms of like being engaged, like that's like the number one thing is like in terms of like at least marketing is 100%.
It sounds like they're empowered. So
100%.
Just by empowering the community, that makes them want to be engaged. It sounds like
100%. Yeah, and we have like people like that create art of like foxes, and people who create like this guy like wrote a short story about a fox, and like it was about like shapeshift. I was like, this is super cool. Like it's just like stuff like that all the time.
That's cool. Building really lore, building connections for sure. So you're in charge of marketing. Does that also include community building, community management? Or do you have someone else who does that?
It includes a lot of that.
You told me you do everything, so
it's a little bit of everything. Yeah, so my team, myself and the people on my team, as well as the people in globalization, are in charge of like community engagement, like general messaging, like all that other stuff. In terms of like moderation and like that kind of stuff, we do have our own moderation team. But in terms of like engaging with people and saying like, "Hey, like blah blah blah," we generally try to spearhead most of that, because it's also nice to have someone who could speak to what's going on currently, because we're marketing it. Like it like the synergies line up in terms of where the information is at and where our minds are at. Usually people are asking questions or wanting to engage with things that are currently being like pushed over email or sent over via Twitter. So it's usually where we head that up.
Okay. This is kind of a goofy question, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you do any sort of for community building and engagement, any sort of promotional stuff, or is it all business? Like, do you have poker nights, and do you have or like and do you see any value in any of that stuff? Because I know a lot of DAOs do that, a lot of communities do that, and it brings people together, things like that. And part B of that question: do you ever how about IRL meetups or events?
Yeah.
And what do you see the value? What kind of value do you see in that?
Yeah. So part A. No, we don't. We do them occasionally. Like we had this really cool. This is super awesome. I'm a huge Overwatch player. I love Overwatch. Like I will talk all day about Overwatch. We had a DAO versus DAO Overwatch tournament, which was super fun. And so it was Shapeshift versus Giveth, and then we both had our teams, and we just sort of like dog fooded it out for a couple hours, and like the winner was like the ultimate champ or something like that. Yeah. And so I really am like trying to push for more stuff like that, but like also at the same time, there's like a bandwidth issue in terms of like the people we have like on the core staff and like the people who can like facilitate something like that. But if like someone from the community, if you were to come into the server and be like, "I want to do a Shapeshift poker night," I would literally this is what I would say, "Hey, thanks for this idea. You want to set it up? Like I will literally throw it on the main Twitter page. I will literally put it in an email blast. All you got to do is just like come to me with an idea and then execute on it, and like I'll throw it together, and maybe I'll even throw you some Fox tokens if I'm like, hey, this is super cool, like bam. And then part 2 of your question, like IRL events and meetups, we're sort of spread everywhere. We actually just migrated all of our Discord time zones to UTC. We used to be centrally located in the States, and now we have more people in like Australia or France or Latin America, and so getting a coordinated time zone of like regularly operating business hours is super difficult. Like more often I find myself getting up at like 6 a.m. Pacific, and or like, you know, starting work at 6 a.m. Pacific and then working until 3, because that's when the rest of the globe is sort of online doing stuff. Europe
and East Coast,
yeah. And so that's generally how that sort of sits out. In terms of like actual other events like ETH Denver, we did a couple other ones like Fest, and also Consensus. You know, we do show up there. We have Foxes there. We don't organize like meetups, but people just sort of like, hey, I'm going. Is anyone else going? Let's meet up. Let's chop it up. And that's generally how it works.
Nice. So what is the business model for Shapeshift? You mentioned that there are no fees to users. So how do you make your money?
Yeah, this is super cool. So Shapeshift is essentially one large affiliate, if you think about that. So what we do is we aggregate all these other things. So, you know, 1inch, CowSwap, Osmosis, 4chain, 0x, whatever. All those aggregators. And
these are multiple chains.
Yeah, so we support 12 chains natively. So you can do cross-chain swaps just as you could before, across all 12 of those chains, as well as bridging through Li-Fi, and then also on-off ramping through like 35 different providers in 105 countries, yada, yada, yada. Like, it's like a super beefy on-ramp, off-ramp experience, super beefy swapper experience. And then also you can like, we have integrated like Thorchain savers and Thorchain saver vaults, and also like idle finance yield opportunities on stable coins. And essentially we have, the way we do is every time a user does one of those activities, that the protocol charges fees. So for example, 1inch takes the positive slippage, and then that's their fee, right? We would take a portion of that as the referrer for that traffic we send them. And so 1inch is taking less fees off the user, and they're giving us the difference basically of what that is.
So the user is actually still paying the fee, no additional fee to Shapeshift though.
Yeah, they're still paying the fee, so that you'd get the exact same rate quoted through us if you were to use like CowSwap versus, you know, going to CowSwap directly and using CowSwap. So that's like one arm of our like nut of how we make our money. The other arm, we have 2 other arms, and they're sort of tangential. One of them is actually donations. So because we're public good, because we're community owned, because we don't charge fees, because we literally exist, we're like the Salvation Army of crypto. Like we literally just like, we're out here like trying to get money to like do good and like just be awesome. One of the things we do is we actually have opt-in to opt-out donations. So when you do a trade on our app right now, you go to app.shapeshift.com/swap. You then go, when you go do a trade, you can then get a quote, and you say at the end of your transaction, before you hit confirm, there's a little checkbox, and it's automatically checked and says, hey, I want to donate 30 basis points to Shapeshift and support public goods, because I believe in supporting public goods. And that entire fee is totally optional. People can opt out. We currently have like 60% opt-in rate to opting into those donations, which is super cool. And, you know, it's like a $2 donation, you know, 30 basis points isn't a ton. Especially when our competitors who are driving just as much traffic on us are like mandating everyone pays 30 basis point fee. We're just saying like, hey, like if you believe in us, if you believe in public goods, if you believe in open source public goods that are completely decentralized, like don't have any kinds of affiliations or risks there, like go ahead and support us. So that's like the second arm, opt-out donations. The third arm is grants. So we actually just spun this up from the marketing work stream, and this is one of my contributors, T. Wells, is like heading this up. He's like literally the man when it comes to grants. And so essentially when we add a new feature, say we just added optimism, right? And so we add optimism chain to our app. Now users can, you know, buy, sell, swap, send, receive, earn on optimism tokens. That's super cool. And so we approach Optimism and say, hey, like we can do this on our app now. Like, do you want to give us any tokens to like help grow the Optimism ecosystem? And then we put up, T. Wells crafted this beautiful proposal and was essentially like, hey, you know, this is our app, this is our functionality, this is what we want to do. We can then access, because we have 11 other chains, we can now get all these other people who aren't currently on Optimism tokens essentially to do actions on Optimism to then get people just interested and aware of what's going on here. And then Optimism sends us, a bunch of tokens, and then we distribute them. And essentially that's like one of the mechanisms that's an example of a grant that we do, but we try to do that for all the features that we roll out, or all the chains rather.
Yeah, that's such an interesting approach because I think there's sort of like this ongoing narrative in the space of bringing new people into Web3, where that's really a method of spreading people around Web3 as well. So people are starting to or given the opportunity and the start to explore other things. And I think, from my own experience, what I've seen, people who tend to spread their wings a little bit in the space just become a lot more knowledgeable of everything that's going on, not necessarily honing in on one specific chain or one specific area of Web3 or crypto, and they become much better ambassadors for Web3 overall. Just knowing this way you can sort of explain and talk about the pros and cons a little bit better. And we all know that there are some positives and some negatives about Web3 and blockchain technology. Being able to seeing one chain versus another, or one sort of DEX versus another, gives you a lot more insight, a lot more knowledge of the overall space. You can be more objective with people and not sound like a salesperson.
No, completely. And that's like the biggest thing for me that I love about Shapeshift is the fact it's such a great and that's the target market, is like people who are sort of migrating either out of a centralized exchange or trying to spread their wings into Web3 and say, hey, if someone is just entering the Web3 space as like a decentralized self-custodial holder, they probably don't know about Li-Fi bridging. They probably don't know about CowSwap. They probably don't know about Thorchain, cross-chain swap. They probably don't know about any of that. And so wouldn't it be so cool if someone could just connect their wallet to one app, and then they're exposed to literally all of this cutting-edge industry tech in a safe space that then easily displays your profile and rainbow charts, that easily shows you all your balances across these chains, so that you don't have any questions about, hey, where's my money? It's like, hey, your money's always right here because we support basically these 12 chains that you'll probably, these are like your lifeblood. It's such a compelling thing, and people can then discover these primitives, and then ideally, as we keep building it out, it just becomes like the one-stop shop for people to then experience Web3. And then should they feel more comfortable enough to then leap out of Shapeshift into exploring perps or doing other crazy degen stuff, they can feel comfortable doing that and knowing that they have a solid foundation.
Yeah. Do you first of all, does Shapeshift do perps?
No, we do not. We're thinking about it.
No connection with GMX is my degen home.
No connections. No connections yet. It's actually all this stuff is on our roadmap, which is publicly accessible, so you could see we have a spec drawn up for it. But nothing's integrated yet. We're building out ArcheoNet, or Archeo Network, which is a decentralized node infrastructure on Cosmos, which essentially will put run all of our nodes for us, and in a decentralized manner. Nice. Basically decentralized node running services, which then the entire app is decentralized. At that point, then we could probably integrate perps, because then we don't have a back end. Then our nodes are all decentralized. Our front end is on IPFS, and then we're literally just a piece of code that I'm so sorry I hit my microphone. Then we're just a piece of code that exists that is immutable. So at that point, we'd probably do something like that.
More decentralized, yeah. Do you have a chain of a blockchain of choice? Do you spend your time? Well, that's part one of the question. Part two, do you think there will be a dominant chain in the distant future? So
part one, my favorite chain, and this is the most slept on chain in my opinion. Everyone sleeps on this chain. It's not I'm super bullish on Gnosis. I love Gnosis to death. I think they have really it's the best alternative to any L2 or sidechain. It's basically it feels relatively solid in terms of how many nodes they're running and how many validators they have, or not validators, how many people are just using it. The TVL is relatively high, and then also there's because of that, like yield farming is still relatively a good thing on there, which is awesome. The team there is super solid. Love their core team. And then in terms of like if there's gonna be a dominant chain moving forward, I think Ethereum is like gonna be the dominant chain, and then people are just gonna continue building off of it, like in these optimistic rollups, or using that as like the base to then build off and sprout off into. Although with the introduction of BRC20s, like it sort of changes things, but also not really, because like anything Bitcoin, they're like, oh, like this is cool, and then like it just totally like shits the bed.
Fizzles out.
So I feel like it's always gonna be in flux, and I almost have this belief that like the token or like the chain that's gonna rule the future doesn't exist yet, if that makes sense, because we're still in a place where we're still learning, right? And so someone could say, hey, like we've learned from the mistakes of all these different things, and now let's build something that is something of a more optimal version of all of this stuff, right? That's sort of my half opinion.
Okay. What do you make of the recent congestion and slow transaction time, and well, more high cost of transactions that's happening? And on Bitcoin, that's one thing, and I think it's a different thing on Ethereum. And what sort of changes or updates or innovations do you think are going to come of that? Because with every problem comes solutions, of course.
I think we're going to see more people using rollups, right? We're going to see a lot more people trying to bridge stuff off of those like mainnet chains, right? Yeah. And finding other alternatives like Bitcoin and Lightning, like that you like basically unaffected if you're using on Bitcoin Lightning. Like that's just how it is. But yeah, no, I think this is like not the nail in the coffin, because that implies like something bad, but this is like the final like push to like fly of like, hey, like,
for sure.
Yeah, like, hey, like, mainnet is for like whales and people who have like an ass ton of money, who sort of don't care about congestion or like don't care about the high fees. Or just do other stuff. And then like the retail users, probably like you and I, not assuming that you're not a whale, but just I'm assuming you're a retail person like you and I, like net worth like under $200,000 of crypto or something like that. It's probably going to move to sidechains where, they're sidechains or L2s, where you can do these transactions and just batch them together and feel good about it.
Isn't that all going to trickle down though? I mean, I'm thinking years down the road. I mean, and then L2s will be $30 a transaction. I mean, do we move to L3s and layer 4s and whatever? I mean, is it just perpetual?
And okay, this is actually a very good point, because this is something that I'm thinking about recently a lot. Specifically, this ties into like Shapeshift as a product too. And so, Shapeshift runs all of our own chain nodes, right? And just stay with me. This is sort of a tangential response, but it gets there. So Shapeshift runs all of our own nodes. So, and we're trying to be the most decentralized interface. So right now we're paying $24,000 a month to run our nodes, basically, for all 12 of those chains. And to a retail user, they don't care that we're running our own nodes. Like, they don't care that we're decentralized. They don't care about the nitty-gritty security. They don't care that it's stored on IPFS. They don't care about blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm talking like the Coinbase people who buy Pepe. Like, the people who just are like, cool, like, money down the drain. Like, I'm talking about those people. And so I'm almost viewing, like, yes, to your point of, like, L3s, L4s, like, some of the people who just don't care, who want to, like, ape in and, like, have slightly less security, or, like, maybe they want to just, like, fuck around in crypto for, like, basically micro pennies, and don't care about necessarily the ethos of blockchains, or necessarily, like, their transactions being the most present, I suppose. Then that totally seems like a valid option. But for the people who, like, as you get more money, I'm assuming you're moving closer to an L1, right? So, like, L2s might be the people who have, like, $300,000, and then, like, if there are L3s in the future, it's like, oh, I have like $10,000, like, I'm gonna use an L3. And then if you have like $100, L4, and like that's just sort of how I'm imagining money moving down.
Sure, and I guess that's a factor of convenience and security.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah,
layer ones, you're gonna get the security and convenience, and as you move further away, if you want the convenience, you're probably sacrificing some security.
Exactly, and that's completely right, because some people don't care about that stuff. Like, some people are fine, like, being more like pro
they
risk.
should care, maybe.
They should care. They should care, but they don't.
They don't know that they care yet.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and largely, like, that's one of the things I'm trying to get people to like convince people, not convince people, but I'm trying to like share people. It's like, hey, like decentralization matters. Like, hey, like being open source matters. Hey, like being in control of your crypto matters. And the more I can hammer that home, ideally, the more people that will do that.
Yeah.
And that's like, again, one of the reasons why I love like doing marketing at Shapeshift, because that's exactly what we're advocating for. But the reality is it's going to be a long, like tough uphill battle of like trying to convince people to take the extra step and move their crypto off of an exchange to a hardware wallet, and then be their own custodial. Because we've been told from the very, very beginning in like middle school, hey, the safe place to store your money is a bank. That's where you put it. And like it's so much more additional work to be a self-custodial holder of crypto. Like, not only is it like a new tech, but you have to do all this other additional management, and there's like minimal protections, and some people are just like scared. And so like trying to like encourage them to do that, huge win, but definitely an uphill battle.
Yeah.
And not everyone will want to.
So not everybody will want to. I agree with that. And not everybody should.
It's true. That is completely true also.
I think not everybody should.
Yeah.
So what are you doing at Shapeshift to increase security and convenience? You mentioned user interface. So, I appreciate that. The user interface makes DeFi easier.
Yeah. So this is something super cool. So we support 12 chains natively on our app. We run all 12 of those nodes. Our front end is on IPFS, so that's all like decentralized to the max. And so our app load time. So if you log in, or if you go to app.shapeshift.com right now and you load into our app and connect your wallet, it will load all 12 of those chains and like all of your entire wallet balance within probably like not even 2-3 seconds. Like literally, if queries all that data instantly populates. Like, and from like a user like perspective, sometimes you go to some of these other dApps and you're like sitting there for probably 30-45 seconds and you're like, cool, spinning wheel looks great. And in terms of like convenience, in terms of speed, in terms of what people are used to, in terms of navigating, like, oh, I click here and I'm expecting, I don't see that there's a transaction, or I don't see it pinging a node. I don't see it like querying and inserting a transaction on chain. They just want, I click button, it does something cool, because that's what the Web 2 experience we're used to. And so in terms of onboarding people into Web 3 and like giving them the peace of mind, at least in terms of like experiencing an application, they're used to that speed. So the better you can give them that speed, generally the more calm they'll have. The more calm they'll be. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
And then also
the more chill they'll have.
And the more chill though, yeah. And then also having an uncluttered UI, so like having everything be very, very clear, very, very transparent. And I think even with like our savers vaults, so if you deposit Bitcoin into the Thorchain savers vaults on Shapeshift, you will see, hey, like here's the fee Thorchain charges, here's the fee that we charge, which is 0. Here's the time to break even, which we've projected based on your deposit. So you'll break even in 7 days based on your initial deposit and the APY. And we'll lay that out for the user before they confirm the transaction. And also, like when you're swapping, it's like, here's the minimum you'll receive. Here's the maximum you'll probably receive. Like you can set your gas. You can do all this other shit. That makes it, a much more like hands-on, transparent experience. So you're not just like, hey, make swap, go burr. Like, it's much more like super straightforward in my opinion.
It also feels like it's a decentralized experience that kind of feels like a centralized banking experience a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that's at least like emotionally that will increase people's securities, particularly less experienced people in the space.
Completely. And I was talking to someone about this, and they were talking about the same thing, and they were like, wow, this really feels like a decentralized, centralized experience. And honestly, from my mindset as a marketing person, as I'm talking to the product team, like I would love it if there was like a coinbase.shapeshift.com where it was skinned to look like Coinbase, but it was literally just Shapeshift. Because like, in theory, I feel like our app has the capability to do pretty much everything except slightly better, and it's decentralized. And it's just like, okay, cool. Like if we could give people that experience, and like maybe it has like a 2 millisecond slower response time than actual Coinbase, like that would be super cool. Or like, it looks relatively similar to that, and giving people as like comfortable of a experience navigating that as possible. Yep.
For now, at least, I'm definitely of the belief that Web3 adoption will happen when it doesn't feel like Web3.
Yeah. 100%.
You and me, we're here because we like technology and cool new shit, and we're willing to take chances to experience that. Not everybody feels the same way. I'm sure most of the people listening to this podcast do feel that way, but there needs to be recognition in this space and actions in this space to bring things to bridge that gap between most people who don't feel that way.
Yeah,
they want it simple. They want it to be easy. No hassles, no risks, and they're probably smarter than you and me in that respect. At least me. All right. Tell me your experience before working in this space was partly in the music industry.
Yeah.
What'd you do?
So I was an artist manager. Did artist management for, oh my God, 4 years. I did artist management for 4 years. Did that with a sort of independent artist management agency, and then I worked at a record label for about a year and a half. And so that was super cool, like working with like huge artists and like doing like tour management stuff or like booking or like streaming stuff.
Nice.
I super loved it. And this is the one thing that like got me. Actually, there were two things that got me out. One, like the pay sucked. Like I was like, this is not the vibe. This is totally like below minimum wage. I have a college degree. Like, what is this?
Working your ass off.
Yeah, that was number one. And then number two was like, it moved too slowly. I started mining Bitcoin back in 2014, and I've been I like through this entire time. Since then I've been basically like involved in the space, like deep Reddit connoisseur of like memes and crypto spiceology. And so like this entire time I was at the industry, I was like, hey guys, like this is happening. Like we should do this now. And they're like, no, like let's not. Like that sounds dumb. And then it frustrates the shit out of me because like a year or 2 years after I left, they were like, oh, this is so cool. I'm like, brother, I told you this 4 years ago. Like you are moving too slow.
We could have been at the forefront.
Yeah, we could have been literally like rich off our pants and like literally pushing innovation of this industry and also like helping artists just exist better. And so it moved too slowly for me. And so I was like, hey, like this is cool. I love the music industry, but it doesn't pay enough. And like I see all this innovation happening over there. And I want to go to where people are innovating and like encouraging the adoption of like this new technology, of this new business process. And that to me is super exciting.
Yeah, totally. I want to hear more about that, but first I'm going to give you my version of that story related to the music, the music industry. I'm a little older than you, and a few of my friends were pretty high level middle management at Sony Records, I think at the time. We went and I had just discovered Napster, and I told them what was going to happen. I saw it right in front of us, and I said, "Look, I just downloaded the new Jay-Z album for free. This may not last forever because there's a good possibility that they'll be cracked down on that. There's copyright laws and there's other things, but the music industry is about to change dramatically. People will not be buying cassettes. They will not be buying CDs anymore. It's going to be streamed. Just position yourself accordingly." And the two of them were like, no, things are so deep seated, nothing can happen. Like that's not going to happen. Sure enough, Napster destroyed the music industry and changed everything. Changed everything, and they weren't prepared. Needless to say, they lost their jobs, but everybody lost their jobs. The entire like middle management of these large record companies were wiped out because distribution completely changed, and music will continue to evolve because there's all it is for the most part. Obviously there's branding and there's artist cultivation and everything around that and culture behind it, but it's just an audio file, at the end of the day. And if people, and look, AI is going to change music dramatically, and totally. And blockchain technology is going to change ownership of music and copyrights and things like that. And it applies to other industries, but music is such a good example. It's such a good example of like where technology can be utilized. It can change really fast.
Yeah, no, completely. I was talking to some of my management friends, right? And I was like, hey, like, have you heard of POAPs? You could have a POAP at your concert, and wouldn't that be so cool? Like a digital, like you literally just scan it. It's super easy. Like that would be literally bare bones entry into Web3, and then you give people who hold POAPs like early access to tickets, and they're like, no, that's a bad idea. I was like, no, like, come on, guys, like this is
even
actually
early release of the new single, or whatever.
That would be so cool. They would be so cool. And there's so many different things you could do with tech. And this is when I first got into Shapeshift. I had my current boss at the time. His name was Petecoin. Everyone there was like mostly people are like pseudo add-on. Actually, I still never know I never knew Petecoin's name. He's just some dude. Never saw his face either. Yeah, and so he was talking to me. He's like, dude, like, let me tell you something. There's like, this is like a 2-part thing. He said, if you can imagine anything in Web3, any possibility, it can happen. It can be built. There's like the sky is literally the limit. Like, do not box yourself into any kind of like idea of what Web3 could be, because that's completely wrong. And the second you do that, like, you're going to be destroyed, and like people are going to pass you, and you're just going to be like, man, what happened? So he's like, that was number one. Number two, like, because the sky's the limit, like when you have a cool idea, like actually write tangible steps to achieve it. Otherwise it just stays an idea, and then it never gets solidified. And so like those two things, like I think if everyone applied that across the board for like at least the music industry, or even in Web3, right, we could see tremendous acceleration in terms of how tech is applied and utilized and like developed and cultivated.
Yeah. Besides innovations specifically in DeFi platform, what else is Shapeshift doing? Anything else in that respect? Sort of like big vision innovations, and you're already at the forefront, I think, in terms of like innovation, cross chain, DeFi. So no pressure, just asking.
Yeah. So with Shapeshift specifically, because we don't deploy any of our own smart contracts, we're just basically taking other people's stuff they build. One of the things that I think we're positioning ourselves well in terms of innovating how things operate, and this is something that, this is just my perspective. Again, this is like not like anything, but talking to like these other DeFi protocols, talking to these other cross-chain swappers, talking to these other incubation programs, right? So Shapeshift incubated Archeo Network. So we put out, I think it was like $1.5 million. We basically said, hey, we'll pay for you to build this, and then it's its own DAO and it does its own thing. And so Shapeshift has been a really good, almost incubator of some of these other projects that then flow back into the Shapeshift ecosystem. So Shapeshift was an early sponsor, or not sponsor, what do you call it? Funder, I guess, of like Silo Finance. Yep. And so basically we were like, hey, Silo Finance, we think you are super cool. Here's some money. Go build something dope. And so we have an entire arm of our DAO, which is essentially like venture specific oriented, or like they're into funding projects that are creative and or
incubation grant. You don't call them grants?
Basically, it's not really a grant necessarily, but it's definitely like a, I don't know. There's a technical term for it. There's not necessarily
a promise that they will build on Shapeshift or they don't. They're not obligated to stay in the ecosystem.
Oh no, yeah. It's just like, hey, like we see you're building something cool, go build it. And the way that I see Shapeshift like innovating specifically outside of just like DeFi, cross chain, whatever. Like we already do that super well. We're going to continue to do that super well. Is like being in my mind, this is how I see like the vision of Shapeshift going forward. And I guarantee if you ask anyone else, it might be different from their perspective. But the way I see it is like Shapeshift as an interface. If you could then focus on building, and like you could say you run a company or you run a DAO and you have a product and it does X, Y, and Z, you then are hiring also a full stack front end developer, as well as like a UI person and another person. If we could just say, hey, like don't even hire those people, build your cool tech, hire 3 more coders, like build faster, build better, use Shapeshift as your front end because we're open source, like literally just you could take our code and just chunk it in. We even have a wallet. If you need a wallet for your project, use the Shapeshift wallet. It supports 12 chains. Guaranteed it probably works for your project if you just plug it into yours. And so ideally, in the sense of like rolling the industry forward, using the fact that we are open source, using the fact we are super multi-chain and a kick-ass front end that you can just grab pieces from, Like I'm imagining in the future these other projects as they develop, I'd love for them to just like take our code, like please steal from us, like please take all of the stuff we've built and then just build faster, build better. And like that's yeah.
No, I mean that's right on with Web3 ethos, and I think a lot of that will also evolve. Maybe not at Shapeshift, but other platforms. DeFi is infrastructure, right? So and it's money exchange in direct money exchange, and I think that a lot of existing platforms will turn into either sort of licensed products for other types of companies, whether it be gaming or entertainment or anything really, fashion industry, where just ease of use for DeFi and for exchanges. And lots of projects have tried this already. I think we're not quite there yet, but I see a lot of this technology. I can't imagine that there's just going to be like thousands and thousands of DeFi marketplaces. They'll have to consolidate in some way, and probably find other use cases if they don't, to survive.
Right.
And I think that seems to be partly where you're going with that.
Yeah, no, it's. I have this analogy, and I think it's a really great analogy. I have not heard one other person I've told this to say, "Hey, that's a great analogy," but I'm going to tell it to you anyways because I think it's great. But
try me.
Okay, so I'm imagining we're in the middle of the gold rush, right? Like think like whenever the gold rush happened way back then, like we're in California,
1840s, right?
1840s, we're looking for gold, right? So what Shapeshift is doing? Shapeshift is out here. We came in on our horse and buggy, and we said, "Hey, there's a gold rush happening. You know what we're going to do?" And everyone's going to say, "Oh, are you going to mine for gold?" And Shapeshift says, "No. We're going to build a house. But it's going to be a really big house. Think like a large warehouse. That's it. Just a big warehouse." And everyone's like, "Why are you doing that?" And then we say, "Oh, just wait." And so everyone's mining gold, and you have other companies come through, and they're like, "Oh, like I see people are buying picks. Like I'm going to build a pick making factory." And we say, "Hey, you want a place to sell your picks? Like sell them in the Shapeshift warehouse. Like you could just pay us a little bit of the profits you make. That's it. And you have a nice little roof over your head. It's awesome." And then more people come in. They're making shovels. The same story over and over again. Pretty soon we have a warehouse full of people. That's like a one-stop shop for people mining gold. Then all of a sudden, boom, gold rush is over. Everyone who's selling picks and shovels, they're like closing up shop. But you know what's popping up around the warehouse? Like a little town. And people are buying groceries and they need food. And so these people are building farms now, and they say, "Hey, I need a place to sell my vegetables." We say, "Oh, the pick guy just moved out. You want a spot? Like, this sounds pretty great, doesn't it?" And they come in, and we say, "Look, all we want is just a little bit of your profits. Just for a nice little roof over your head, that's all we want.
Yep.
And we'll bring you, like, a consolidated consumer base that knows what Shapeshift is and has been around since the gold rush, before the gold rush has started. Like, it's the most ideal place for you to do anything. And, who knows, maybe the town dries. You could, imagine the cycle you could repeat for as many different industries as you want. But like that's what I imagine as like the ultimate thing that's like has the staying power to exist in the crypto market, because it moves so fast, because everything is so scattered, right? You have to be able to be flexible to adapt the things that are coming in and cater to an audience that wants your stuff.
For sure. Pretty good analogy. I think it's
okay. I'll put
it
in the bag. I'll put it in the bag.
No,
okay.
It's a good one, man. No, I mean, essentially, you're the real estate, but you're also a facilitator, and supporting the businesses that are potentially working in and around that real estate. And,
yeah, exactly.
There's a lot to it. I mean, that's sort of like the Web3 real estate.
Yeah. And the thing is like because we have the name recognition of Shapeshift, and because we have this open source platform, and because we have the engineering power and like all these other resources, like we have the capacity to like bring traffic to some of these projects that we integrate into us. That is super cool. And then also our users benefit from that, because our users are then exposed to this new technology that's either new and underused or just super cool and no one really knows about it.
It sounds like you have a very cool job, HPayne, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Do you have and I should rephrase my typical question. I usually ask if what would be your dream project? What would be your dream project or partner with at Shapeshift?
Ooh, that's a good one. Okay.
Because you are talking about like different, there different businesses can walk in and partner with Shapeshift. So who would you want to knock on your door tomorrow?
That is really hard. Give me a second to think about it.
All right. All right. Do you have a particular industry that you think is a good fit?
For sure, I think because like our current consumer base is mainly around swapping and DeFi, like we probably would stay there for now. But like we were talking with this other protocol, Landex, which is still, I think they're still in beta. Maybe you've heard of them. I don't know if they're live yet.
Not, but...
yeah, so basically it's like yield based on corn and soy. So it's like tokenized crops and stuff there. So like you can buy, and then you can earn yield assets on like. Yeah. You can earn yield on real world assets like, oh, I have 1 ton of corn and denoted in this corn token, and then I'm going to stake it in a liquidity pool, or I'm going to do something with it, and then stuff there. I think as we're sort of transitioning over there, that could be something cool. But I don't know if that's like the dream partner. In terms of like a dream partner, oh my God, I couldn't tell you. I literally couldn't.
I'm gonna have to get you back on then.
You'll have to
think about it.
I will
think about it for a couple of weeks or months, and yeah. Where can people find Shapeshift?
Yeah, so people can find Shapeshift at shapeshift.com, or if you want to go right to the app, it's app.shapeshift.com. That's where you can find us. You can find us on Twitter at Shapeshift. Nice. It's super dope, super easy, super straightforward. And then on Discord, it's discord.com/shapeshift. It's super straightforward.
Yep. And anyone can walk into the Discord and poke around and add suggestions and
exactly. Anyone could come down there, and if you like the podcast, you could hop down into marketing and growth and say, hey, like HPayne was pretty cool, or hey, that HPayne guy, complete idiot, would never talk to him again. Don't have him on the podcast.
Let's get those comments out there. Let's hear it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Nice. And what about you, HPayne? Where can people find you?
Yeah, you could find me on Twitter at HPayne_writer. And that's pretty much it. I'm on Discord too. I'm not going to say that because then I'll get a bunch of bots like hitting me up and like being like, hey, you want to win some Bitcoin? Like, but you could also find me on Discord. If you join the Shapeshift server, I'm there. And that's where you can find me. Nice.
It's great having you on. If you enjoyed this podcast, please comment, please subscribe. Even if you didn't, please comment, please subscribe. Spotify, YouTube are the best places for the early podcast from Bankless Consulting. Bankless Consulting is at Bankless Consult on Twitter, and our newsletter is banklessconsulting.substack.com. Check it out. Really good alpha in there every week. And HPayne, thanks for joining, man. This was awesome.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
All right.